Alrighty, so let's talk about Pressure. This is the newest and probably most well-done Doors-inspired game to come out of Roblox these past few weeks, and man, let me just say, it has been quite the treat to play. It is probably my most favorite Doors-inspired game out there, which is why I'm making a video about it right now. However, during the duration of this game's life on Roblox, I've heard many players say that it's even better than its source material, that being Doors. Now, I always thought that a large part of these opinions was due to how Doors has been kinda stale for a long while due to lack of updates, whereas Pressure just released and it has a ton of new features. So I've decided to compare both Doors and Pressure to see overall which game is better. So with all of that being said, let's begin. Alrighty, so the way this video will work is that I'll discuss various core gameplay elements from both Pressure and Doors. I'll talk about what both games do right and wrong for said elements, as well as state, in my opinion, what game does better in each category. Let's start with overall map design. Now, both Doors and Pressure have very high quality builds and design. However, for this category, I would have to give the point to Pressure. This is due to Pressure having a lot more variety in terms of different rooms. In Pressure, you can encounter normal rooms, flooded rooms, overgrown rooms, destroyed rooms, and so much more. Additionally, Pressure also has a ton of rare rooms, which, as their name suggests, have a rare respawn chance, and they are usually Easter eggs for other games, so they are always a fun treat to encounter. Although Doors does have some room variety, it just isn't to the extent of what Pressure has, so overall I'd have to say that Pressure has a better map design. However, just because Pressure looks pretty doesn't mean its gameplay is perfect, and that's why I'd say in terms of progression, Doors is better. Now for some context, Doors has 100 rooms you have to go through in a typical playthrough. Around door 30 is when you can encounter your first mini-boss. On door 50 you encounter your first major boss, followed by a mid-run shop on door 52. Around door 70 is when you encounter your second mini-boss. Doors 90 to 99 are the greenhouse, which is a very difficult area which tests everything you have learned thus far, and door 100 is where the final boss fight and ending of the game takes place. As you have just heard, Doors has a very balanced progression. You can never go more than 30 rooms without having to face a milestone event, and this can keep the playthrough from feeling too stale for long periods of time, as you have to tackle a major roadblock every once in a while. If we compare this to Pressure's progression, we can see just how better it is. In Pressure, you can encounter the mid-run shop around door 50, and then around door 70 you can encounter the first major boss. Doors 100 to 109 are the Ridge, which, like the greenhouse, tests all the skills you've learned thus far, and the final boss is on door 110. As you can see, the first 50 rooms of the playthrough, there is no milestone events to encounter, and this can cause this part of the game to feel like it's dragging on. So overall, I'd have to say that Doors has a better progression system than Pressure. Moving on, let's talk about lore and world building. Now, despite both Doors and Pressure having an underlying narrative as well as a main story the player follows, Pressure handles it a whole lot better. For example, in Doors, in terms of the player character's story, they somehow just appeared in the hotel, and now they have to try to escape. Meanwhile, in Pressure, your player character is a convicted felon, who has to secure a crystal from the facility where the gameplay takes place in order to earn your freedom. In terms of the underlying narrative in Doors, it revolves around the three spirits of the hotel's architects, whereas in Pressure, it revolves around the facility itself and what experiments go on in there. Additionally, Pressure has a feature known as Documents, which are collectibles which can be obtained through playing the game. Documents offer unique lore on various aspects of Pressure, such as entities and hazards. These also help expand the world building of the game. Overall, it seems Pressure is more focused on lore and story than Doors is, so the point has to go to them. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about scariness. After all, Doors and Pressure are both horror games, so which one is scarier? Well, I'd have to give the point to Doors for this one. Now, don't get me wrong, both games are designed to be scary. I'd actually say the design of entities in Pressure are more horrifying than the ones in Doors. However, at least for me, jump scares and entities aren't the scariest part of these games. You see, the biggest fear which can be experienced in these games, even after all the jump scares have been experienced multiple times, is the fear of losing progress, and I believe Doors perfected this. You see, indoors, reviving is extremely limited. Not only does reviving cost Robux, which makes saving revives when only absolutely necessary a new factor which has to be considered, but it is prohibited when you reach the end of the game, which creates a sense of fear as you can no longer save your progress after making it so far in the playthrough. In Pressure, revives can be brought with in-game currency, and they can be used multiple times at the very end of the game, such as in the Ridge, and this completely gets rid of the fear of losing progress, which works so well indoors. Additionally, something else which plays into this fear is the final boss fight in both games, which I also believe Doors does a better job at. Indoors, the final boss fight has you and a deadly monster trapped in a small room with various corridors, and you must maneuver around the monster collecting various fuse boxes without being spotted. In Pressure, however, you are in a massive expanse of water, and you have to repair various underwater cables without being spotted by up to 3 massive entities. Indoors, the claustrophobic nature of the final boss area, as well as how you can never really tell where the monster is, paired up with how you can no longer revive, creates a really big fear of dying and losing everything, which fits very nicely with Doors' overall horror theme. Meanwhile, in Pressure, the largest area the final boss fight takes place in, paired with how you can always tell where the threats are, doesn't create nearly as potent of a horror effect present in the Doors final boss fight. So overall, I'd have to say that Doors is scarier than Pressure, especially if you aren't really affected by jump scares. Lastly, the final topic I'd like to discuss are the monsters, or entities I should say, which can be encountered in both games. And for this topic, I can't really decide a clear winner. Both Doors and Pressure have unique enemies which you can encounter, with some arguably being better than others. For example, I really love the Pandemonium entity in Pressure, due to how not only do players have to time hiding in a locker from it, but they also have to complete a somewhat difficult mini-game in order for it to go away. However, I also really like A90 in Doors, due to the entity's interesting concept of forcing the player to stop moving, as well as how infamous it is in the community for being one of the most difficult threats to master. So, in terms of entities, I'd have to give the point to both Pressure and Doors for this category. So, overall, which game is better? Well, both Pressure and Doors have their pros and cons. For example, Pressure undoubtedly handles lore and storytelling better, but Doors has a much more enjoyable gameplay progression. Really, it's up to you to decide, but I will say that before locking in your vote, wait till both games have become stale with content, as that way opinions aren't tainted by whatever is new and shiny. I know Pressure just released and the heavily awaited Floor 2 update is just on the horizon for Doors, but to accurately compare both games they have to be in a similar state. As for me, as much as I like Pressure, I still think Doors is better, due to many of its pros I talked about, as well as how I've had a stronger connection with the game as I've had a lot more time to play it. So with all of that being said, let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed.